the kingdom did not lose its king on a battlefield. It lost him in his own palace. Quietly, carefully. And for 7 years, almost no one realized it had happened. Not the council, not the guards, not even the woman who had once loved him most. Welcome to Sansa Romance Oracle. Because when Octavia left the capital, she believed she was walking away from betrayal. What she was really walking away from was something much worse. Something that had already started wearing her husband's face. Something that had already learned how to smile like him, speak like him, and rule in his place. And the sickest part, the man she thought had destroyed her may have been the first victim. Not the villain, the first victim. That truth would take years to surface. But the first clue arrived one winter night in a sealed note with a broken hawk stamped into the wax. Come before dawn. Alone. No signature. No explanation. Just that symbol. A symbol only one person in the world should have known. Octavia had seen it once before, long ago, hidden inside the lining of a private letter from the king himself. Back then, it had been a warning, a promise, a sign that if the palace ever turned against them, she was to trust no one and nothing except that broken hawk. Now it was back, and she was standing in the dark with her 2 children, reading the note by candlelight while the rest of the world slept. Her son was the first to speak. "Mama," he whispered. "Is it the palace again?" Octavia looked down at him. He was only 8 years old, but he had the tired eyes of someone much older. Children born into secrets age differently. They notice the wrongness before adults admit it. That was the problem with her son. He noticed too much. "No," she said softly. Then, after a beat, "It might be worse." Her daughter lifted her head from where she had been half asleep against Octavia's shoulder. She had her father's sharp jaw and her mother's impossible instincts. Nothing escaped her for long. She pointed at the note. "That's the king's mark," she said. Octavia did not answer. That was answer enough. The girl sat up straighter. So the real one sent it. Octavia hesitated, because the real answer was the one she did not want to say out loud. Maybe not. That was the trouble. For 7 years, the kingdom had called him a husband, a ruler, a father, a liar, a blessing, a mistake, and a problem. But Octavia had long suspected something else entirely. She had suspected he was no longer the only man wearing his own name. And now the broken hawk was back, which meant it was time to find out. "Get dressed," she said. Both children froze. Her son blinked. "We're going back." Octavia folded the note closed. "We're going to the palace," she said. Her daughter's face lit with dangerous excitement. "To do what?" Octavia looked toward the window, where the palace towers cut a black shape against the night sky. "To find out what is pretending to be my husband." And that was the beginning. 7 years earlier, the story had looked very different. Back then, Octavia had been the queen everyone pitied. The barren queen, the quiet queen, the one who walked the halls with a perfect face and a broken heart while the court whispered behind its fans and jeweled sleeves. No hair, no child, no future. That was what they said. And the whispers always came louder after Lionel was seen at her side, because he looked like the kind of man who should have had a son by now. Strong, imposing, warm when he wanted to be. A king who laughed easily in public and touched her hand with private tenderness when no one was watching. That was the version of him Octavia had loved. The one who brought her wine in the gardens. The one who leaned down to kiss the back of her neck while servants pretended not to look. The one who swore he did not care about the rumors. The one who told her she was enough. The one who said he would wait. But waiting became a kind of torture in the court. Every month, another glance. Every season, another question. Every feast, another comment made just a little too casually by women who wanted to hear her crack. The kingdom did not ask whether she was hurting. It only asked whether she was useful. And then, one night, she finally had the news she had been praying for. She was pregnant, after years of trying. After years of silence. After years of hearing the word barren spoken like a verdict. She had nearly run to Lionel's chambers, with the healer's words still ringing in her chest. She had imagined his face the moment he heard. The shock. The joy. The way his entire body would go still before he laughed and pulled her into his arms. She had imagined him lifting her off the floor. She had imagined tears. She had imagined that, at last, something in their life would be simple. She had been wrong, because when she reached his chambers, the door was already open, and from inside she heard a woman's breathless laugh. Then Lionel's voice, low, rough, a voice she knew better than her own, a voice that had once belonged to her alone in the dark. She stopped in the doorway, and everything inside her went cold. The first thing she smelled was him. His scent, warm skin, cedar, that faint smoky sweetness she had learned by heart over years in the same bed. The second scent was different. A woman, too close, too fresh. And then she saw the bed, the sheets, the bare skin. A woman sprawled where Octavia had slept that morning. Lionel leaning over her, his shirt gone, his hair undone, his mouth open against the other woman's neck. The sound that came out of him made Octavia's stomach drop. It was the sound he made when he wanted her. That same broken, hungry sound. But now it belonged to someone else. The woman laughed, breathless. And what if the queen finds out? Lionel's answer came easy. She won't. Octavia could not move. Not at first. Her body seemed to have forgotten how. The world had narrowed to the room, the bed, the man she had trusted, and the woman in it. Lionel shifted his weight, and the other woman clutched at his shoulder. "I need this," he said. His voice was hard with pleasure. "I need an heir. She can't give me one." Octavia's vision blurred. "She's barren," he continued, almost impatient now. 3 years and nothing. The woman traced a hand down his back, smiling. "And you're sure this is wise?" Lionel gave a short laugh. "It is necessary." That word hit harder than any blade. Necessary. As if Octavia's pain were merely a political inconvenience. As if her body were a failed tool. As if a queen without children was a flaw to be corrected. Octavia did not scream. She did not rush forward. She did not collapse. She simply closed the door very gently, then walked away. The corridor felt longer on the way back. She passed servants and nodded to them, as if her life had not ended behind a closed door. She kept her face calm. She kept her spine straight. She reached her chambers, shut the door, and stood in the center of the room staring at nothing. Then she lowered one hand to her stomach. Her fingers trembled. Because the healer's words were still in her mind. Pregnant. She had not told Lionel yet. She had come to tell him. But the joy was gone now. Crushed under something black and irreversible. He had not known. He would never know. Not from her. Not after this. The letter took her longer to write than it should have. Not because it was long. Because every word felt like tearing skin. Lionel, I have been unhappy for some time. I did not realize how deeply until recently. Court life does not suit me. This marriage does not suit me. You need an heir. I cannot give you one. I am leaving. Do not follow me. This is better for both of us. Octavia. She folded the page, sealed it, set it on the desk. Then she packed before dawn. Somewhere behind her, her life was ending. And somewhere inside her, another one was beginning. She did not know then that she was carrying not one child, but two. That truth would come later, much later. And by then, it would already be too dangerous to turn back. Because some exits are really just the beginning of a different kind of trap. 7 years passed. The kingdom moved on. Or pretended to. That was what courts did best. They buried disasters under etiquette and renamed them tradition. Octavia lived in exile with her sister, Lyora, far enough from the capital to breathe, close enough to hear rumors. She learned how to grow her own herbs, how to bargain with traders, how to hide fear behind a steady voice, how to raise children who asked dangerous questions. Her twins grew fast. Too fast. Merrick, quiet and watchful, noticed things no child should have noticed. Sarah, bold and fierce, asked the questions everyone else was too polite to ask. Neither of them knew the full story of their father, only that he had been part of her old life, only that he lived somewhere behind the palace walls, only that their mother's face changed whenever he was mentioned. Then the invitation arrived, a royal summons. The king was to be engaged. Lady Emmeline Vale, and the palace, in one sweeping act of public cruelty, had decided the ex-queen should attend. Octavia read the announcement once, then again, then threw a vase at the wall, so hard it shattered into glittering pieces. "I thought you were over him," Leora said from the doorway, not even bothering to hide the amusement in her voice. "I am." Octavia snapped. Completely. Lyora raised one brow. Octavia pointed at the broken vase. "This is not about him. It is absolutely about him. It is about the audacity of inviting me to watch him marry another woman." Leora crossed her arms. "That's still about him." Octavia did not answer. Because there was no point pretending. She had told herself for years that she was over Lionel. That whatever they had once been had burned out into ash. But the body remembers what the mind tries to deny. And somewhere deep inside her, the old wound still had a pulse. The wedding invitation sat on her vanity for 3 days. On the 4th, her daughter walked into the room, looked at it, and asked, "Is that why you're angry?" Octavia turned slowly. "Why would you think that?" Sarah's expression made the answer obvious. Because children always know. Because they hear the shape of sorrow in the walls. Because they live closer to the truth than adults do. "We're going," Octavia said. Merrick looked up from the floor. "Why?" "Because I was invited." "By father?" Sarah asked. Octavia picked up the invitation. "No," she said. Then she smiled a little. "By someone pretending to be organized." That made Merrick snort. Sarah's eyes narrowed. "You think something is wrong?" Octavia held the invitation in both hands. "I think," she said carefully, "that the palace is lying to itself." She did not explain more. Not yet. They dressed for the capital in silence. Octavia chose crimson silk, a deep, rich color that clung to her like a declaration of war. If Lionel wanted to humiliate her with his engagement, she would walk into that ballroom looking like a queen he had no right to lose. If the kingdom expected a broken ex-wife, it would be disappointed. If the palace expected obedience, it would get a storm. The carriages rolled at dusk. By the time the palace gates came into view, the sky had darkened into blue, black velvet. Octavia's pulse did not slow once, not in the carriage, not at the gate, not even when the palace came into sight and she saw the windows lit for the ball. The ballroom was exactly as she remembered. High crystal chandeliers, white gold pillars, long tables of silver and rose arrangements, music floating through the air like perfume, and people, so many people. Nobles, counselors, court women, power brokers, smiling too hard and pretending not to watch the entrance. The moment Octavia stepped into the room, the entire hall shifted. The whispers began immediately. She heard her old title carried from mouth to mouth. The former queen. The barren one. The one who left. The one who came back. She ignored all of it. Then she saw him. Lionel, across the ballroom, tall, broad-shouldered, dark hair cut shorter than before, face sharper, stronger, colder. He looked like a king who had spent too long learning how to be a wall. Octavia watched him for one breath. Then he turned. Their eyes locked. And something happened. His face changed first, not into happiness, not into anger, into shock. Pure, unguarded shock. For 1 second, he looked like the world had been pulled out from under him. Then the expression vanished. His features locked down again, and he began walking toward her. The crowd parted. Of course it did. He had always done that to rooms. Even before the crown, he had carried the kind of force that made people move without understanding why. He stopped in front of her. Octavia. Her heart did something unbearable at the sound of her name. She kept her voice level. Your Majesty. Something flickered in his eyes. She saw pain there, real pain, and that complicated everything. Fancy meeting you here, he said. The line was absurd, almost rude, almost ordinary, as if 7 years of silence were just a minor inconvenience. Octavia gave him a cold smile. You did invite me. His brow drew together. I did. The surprise was immediate and very real. She nearly laughed. He actually looked baffled. That was when the first thread of suspicion touched her skin. You didn't send the invitation. He glanced toward the rest of the ballroom, as if the answer might be hidden in the crowd. All noble families were invited. The words were too polished, too rehearsed. Standard protocol, he added. Octavia's eyes narrowed. He was doing something, or avoiding something, or both. I didn't expect you to come, he said. The line landed hard enough to sting. Octavia's smile sharpened. It would have been rude not to. He studied her face for a second longer than necessary. Then his gaze dropped to her dress. Red still suits you. The words were quiet. They carried memory. Not one memory. Many. The garden, the summer estate. The evenings when he would catch her alone and tug her into the nearest shadow to kiss her like he had been starving. Octavia looked at him and felt something old and dangerous stir under her ribs. Then a voice drifted in from the side. Lionel. A woman stepped into view with graceful precision. Emmeline Vale, beautiful in the polished, effortless way some women are beautiful when they know exactly how to enter a room and make it obey. She slipped her hand onto Lionel's arm with the comfortable confidence of someone who had done it 100 times. "Darling," she said, her voice rich with public warmth. "There you are." Octavia saw the way Lionel's posture shifted. Not much, just enough, a fraction. Emmeline smiled at her. "Lady Octavia, how lovely to see you again." Octavia bowed her head. "How lovely indeed." Emmeline's gaze moved over her face, her dress, her bearing. Then she looked at Lionel. "We should make the rounds," she said. "Your brother is waiting." "Of course," Lionel replied. But his eyes remained on Octavia. The woman on his arm smiled too brightly. Then she led him away. When the pressure of their presence finally lifted, Octavia exhaled through her nose. A man nearby muttered, "That was awkward." "No," Octavia murmured. "That was designed." The night should have ended there. It did not, because some part of the palace was already waiting for her, and some part of Lionel had already been broken, open long enough to let the truth slip through. The twins did not stay where she put them. Of course they did not. Children never do when they sense a mystery. They slipped through the crowd with the deadly competence only curious children possess, and within moments Octavia lost sight of them. Panic sharpened in her chest. She turned, scanning faces, shoulders, hems of dresses, the shifting tide of guests. Then she heard it, a child's voice, clear, too clear. "Excuse me." And then, in the absolute middle of the ballroom, her daughter had reached up and tugged on Lionel's sleeve. The hall stopped. Not slowly, all at once. Every conversation cut off. Every head turned. Every breath seemed to freeze. Octavia's blood turned to ice. Her daughter looked up at Lionel and asked, in a voice loud enough to carry through the silence, "Are you our daddy?" The room did not breathe. Octavia's heart stopped. Lionel stared at the child. The child stared back. The silence grew so thick it felt like the whole ballroom had fallen into the bottom of the sea. Then Octavia moved. She crossed the room fast enough that people stepped back out of instinct. "Forgive my daughter," she said with a thin, controlled laugh. Children can be bold. Her son arrived a moment later, too late to stop anything, his face pale with shock. Sarah had not planned to be subtle. That much was obvious. Octavia lowered her voice. "Come here." But her daughter did not move. Her eyes stayed on Lionel. "Answer me." The whispering started instantly. People leaned toward one another. A few guests looked delighted. A few horrified. Lionel's face had gone white. For one moment, he looked more stunned than angry. Then something inside him hardened. "You should listen to your mother," he said. His voice was calm, too calm. The kind of calm that frightens people when it arrives too fast. Octavia felt the floor shift under her feet. Relief and dread hit at the same time. He had not denied it, not directly, and that tiny non-answer rippled through the room like a dropped stone in still water. She took the children's hands and got them out of the ballroom before anyone could ask another question. The corridor, beyond the doors, felt colder than it should have. Her daughter tried to speak 3 times before Octavia finally snapped, "Not now." That shut her up. Barely. They made it back to the suite in silence. Once the door closed, Octavia turned on them with the kind of fury only a frightened parent can produce. "What were you thinking?" Her son flinched. Her daughter's chin lifted. "You told us not to speak." "I told you not to speak to strangers." "He is not a stranger," she said. Octavia closed her eyes. That was the problem. He wasn't. Not really. And that meant the children had just shoved a knife into a wound she had tried very hard to keep closed. There came a knock at the door. One of the servants stood there pale and nervous. "Lady Octavia," he said. "His Majesty requests your presence in his study." Octavia's stomach fell straight through the floor. The study. That room. She knew every corner of it. Knew the place where Lionel used to sit and scowl at paperwork while she teased him for pretending to hate administration. Knew the chair by the window where he once told her he wanted a child so badly it scared him. Knew the old crack in the left wall where the palace had settled during a storm years ago. Too many memories. Too many ways for the past to ambush her. She left the twins in the suite and followed the servant down the familiar corridor. Every step felt wrong. Every step felt too familiar. The study door opened. Lionel stood at the window with his back turned. His shoulders were tense. His hands were clenched behind him. When he turned, Octavia saw something she had not expected. He looked afraid, not of her. Of what she might say. "What are those children?" he asked. Octavia folded her arms. "Mine." His jaw tightened. "And their father." A beat. "He is not in their lives." Lionel took a step forward. The air changed. The room seemed to compress around them. "Did you know?" he asked, voice rough. She knew what he was asking. "Did you know when you left? Did you know before? Did you know that night?" "Yes," she said quietly. His face shifted. "You knew you were pregnant?" She held his gaze. "Yes, for a second." He looked as though the floor beneath him had cracked. "You left without telling me." Her lips parted. The words she wanted to say burned in her throat. "I left because I found you with another woman. I left because I thought you had humiliated me and discarded me. I left because I did not know whether you were cruel or simply careless." But the words did not come. Because she was looking at him now, and something was wrong. Not emotionally, physically, something in his posture, the way he stood, the rhythm of his breathing, the exact angle of his chin. Not enough to accuse, enough to unsettle. He stepped closer. "I want to meet them." Octavia stiffened. "Nope. They're my children. They're mine." She snapped back. The room went cold. The words hung between them like sparks. Octavia's chest rose and fell too fast. "I carried them," she said. "I raised them. I kept them alive. I will not let you walk in now and claim what you abandoned." His expression hardened, but only for a moment. Then it cracked. Abandoned. The word sounded wounded. Genuine. Too genuine. And that was when the first real tremor of doubt entered her mind. Not enough to shake her. Enough to disturb the ground. Lionel looked at her like he was trying to say something without words. Then, quietly, he said, "I never stopped wanting you." Her breath caught. He took another step. Octavia stepped back. "Don't." "Octavia?" "Don't." His voice softened. "Red." That old name. The one he used only when they were alone. The one that had once made her feel seen. It hit her like a hand around the heart. She should have left then. Instead, she stayed. Because some part of her still wanted to know whether the man in front of her was the one who had destroyed her, or something else, something worse. "I saw you," she said at last. His face shifted. She felt the tension in the room sharpen. "I saw you in your chambers," she said, with another woman. Silence. Then, very carefully, "What?" Octavia laughed once, bitter and sharp. "Do not pretend not to know." His face went utterly still. "I never cheated on you," he said. The words landed with the force of a blade. Octavia stared at him. For one terrible second, the memory she had buried cracked open. The door, the bed, the woman, the voice, the smell. Lionel's voice, saying the words she had never forgiven. "I need an heir." She swallowed hard. "You expect me to believe that?" His expression changed, not into anger, into confusion. Deep, real confusion. "What exactly did you see?" The question hit too hard, because what if it had not been what she thought? No. She refused that thought. "You were there," she said coldly. "I saw you." His mouth opened, closed. Then he said almost hoarsely, "Then someone wanted you to." That made her go still. He took a step toward her. "Octavia," he said, his voice suddenly rough, "I need you to listen to me. Something is wrong in this palace. Something has been wrong for a long time." Her pulse jumped. Wrong how? He hesitated. That hesitation was not a lie. It was fear, and that was worse. "When did you start noticing it?" he asked. Noticing what? The wrongness. His words made her throat tighten. The wrongness. It was exactly the word her children had used. She stared at him. He stared back, and for the first time since she had returned, she felt the shape of a much larger truth press against the walls of the room. Whatever was happening in the palace, he knew it. Or he knew enough to be afraid of it. Before she could ask anything else, the door opened sharply. A servant rushed in, breathless. "My lord," he gasped. "Lady Emmeline requests you immediately. She says it is urgent." Lionel's expression closed. He looked at Octavia, then away, then back again. "I'll return," he said. She caught the oddness of that instantly. He said it like a man trying to keep a promise he was not sure he could make. When he left, Octavia stood in the study for a long moment without moving. Then she realized something had gone very wrong. The children were nowhere in the suite. Their shoes were gone. The room was empty, and the only thing left on the table was a small strip of cloth. Blue, torn, scented faintly with smoke and iron. Octavia's body went rigid. No. She grabbed the cloth and ran. The palace had swallowed her children. That was the moment she stopped being shocked by the night. The moment she started becoming dangerous. She searched the sitting room, the gallery, the conservatory. Nothing. No Sarah, no Merrick, no witnesses. Then, in the corridor near the old lower stair, she heard a sound. A tiny scrape. She spun. Merrick stood at the end of the hallway, pale, wild-eyed, breathing hard. Relief hit so hard she nearly collapsed. "Merrick." He looked at her and said, in one terrified breath, "Mama, they took Sarah?" Octavia's blood turned to ice. Her son grabbed her hand. "We have to go. Now." "Where?" "I don't know, but she said the man wasn't father." Octavia stared at him. "What man?" Merrick's face was white. "The king." That word landed like a thunderclap. He tugged her down the corridor. "There's something under the palace," he said. "Something hidden?" Octavia ran. That was the only choice. She ran after her son, down the lower stair, through old passages she had never seen before, stone corridors that smelled of damp and dust and secrets. And then she saw it. A hidden passage lined with cells, a cell at the far end, and inside it, her daughter. Chained, gagged, crying so hard her shoulders shook. Octavia's scream tore through the corridor. She ran for the bars. Her hands hit iron. She looked for a key, anything at all. Then a shadow moved behind her. Too late. The blow struck the back of her head with brutal force. The world vanished. When she woke, her wrists were chained. Her head throbbed so badly it felt split open. The cell was cold. The floor was stone. Sarah was beside her, still chained, eyes wide and wet, the gag finally removed. "Mama," she whispered. Octavia forced herself upright, despite the nausea crashing through her skull. "It's all right," she said automatically. It was not all right. Not remotely. But children need to hear something before fear swallows them whole. She reached for the chains. Spellbound. Of course they were spellbound. The palace was not merely hiding prisoners. It was hiding them properly. That meant the people behind it were not amateurs. Footsteps echoed outside the cell. Then a woman stepped into view. Emmeline, perfectly composed, dressed too elegantly for a dungeon. Her dark hair pinned in an immaculate twist. Her expression almost sad. Octavia's whole body went rigid. "You," she said. Emmeline's voice was soft. "Such a shame you couldn't stay gone." Octavia surged against the chains. "You locked my daughter in a cell." Emmeline's face barely changed. "I had no choice. Do not insult me. I'm not." Octavia's voice rose with every word. "Where is my son?" "He'll be caught soon enough." The calm in Emmeline's tone was horrifying. Octavia pulled harder. "What have you done to the king?" At that, Emmeline smiled. It was not a kind smile. It was a tired one. The smile of someone who had already made peace with being monstrous. "Why would you ask that as if there is only one king?" Octavia went still. Emmeline watched the realization start to form. Then, she said, the thing that made the floor disappear under Octavia's feet. "The man you saw on the throne is not Lionel." Octavia stared at her. Her mind refused the sentence for one entire second. Then a second. Then the meaning crashed in. Emmeline stepped closer to the bars. "He is a replacement." Octavia's mouth went dry. A replacement. The words her children had used. The suspicion she had refused to name. "Impossible," Octavia whispered. "Is it?" Emmeline tilted her head. "What did you think had been happening all these years?" A little infidelity. A messy affair. Men in power are often so much more useful when people imagine their crimes are ordinary. Octavia's blood ran cold. Emmeline continued, voice low and deliberate. "The real Lionel was marked long before you left." Watched, measured, studied. Someone in the old court knew he could be copied. Copied by who? Emmeline's expression tightened. By people with the right gifts. Octavia stared. The archive. The wrong smell. The copied face. The false signatures. The children noticing the wrong laugh. Everything. "Oh," Emmeline said softly. "You understand now." Octavia did understand. And the understanding made her stomach twist. This was not one liar. This was a system. A structure. A hidden network using identity as a weapon. A palace built on imitation and fear. Emmeline folded her hands behind her back. "Your children are inconvenient," she said. "They notice too much. They have the family instinct. The nose. The recognition. That makes them dangerous." Sarah began to shake with fury. Octavia felt it too. Her own rage was climbing so fast it felt like fire under her skin. "What do you want?" Emmeline smiled. "Simple," she said. "I want you to convince Lionel to leave the way he should have left 7 years ago. Quietly. Permanently. You disappear. He stays irrelevant. The kingdom continues." Octavia stared at her, then laughed once. A hard, disbelieving sound. "You think I'll help you?" Emmeline's eyes cooled. "You will," she said. "Or your children die." The cell went silent. Sarah's breath hitched. Octavia's entire body went still. Emmeline watched her with the confidence of someone who thinks pain is the same thing as control. But Octavia was not listening to her threat anymore. She was listening to the shape of the story. If Lionel was replaced, and Emmeline was part of it, and the palace had hidden something under itself for years, then the whole court was infected. Which meant there had to be a weak point. There had to be a mistake. And there was one. Her children had already noticed the false king was wrong. That meant they could probably find the real one. Octavia kept her face blank and said, "Let me think." Emily nodded once, pleased. "I'll give you until morning." Then she turned and walked away, as if she had just won. The moment the footsteps faded, Octavia leaned close to her daughter and said in a whisper, so low it barely existed, "I am not helping her." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "I know." Octavia swallowed. "We are getting out." Sarah nodded. Merrick's voice suddenly came from the darkness beyond the cell, and there he was. Small, dust-covered, alive, a key set in his mouth. Octavia's breath broke. He shifted, unlocked the cell with shaking fingers, and before the door had even finished swinging open, both children were in her arms. Relief hit so hard Octavia almost sobbed. Her son had found the guard station, stolen the keys, come back for them. The boy she had raised in secrecy had just walked into the underground bones of the palace and outsmarted its guards. Clever, fierce, infuriatingly brave. Sarah lifted her head first. "We're not leaving without father," she said. Octavia opened her mouth. Merrick beat her to it. "And we're not leaving without proving who's lying." There was something very strange about hearing your child say the thing you were terrified to say yourself. Octavia stared at them for one long second, then nodded. "All right," she said, "but we do it my way." That was how the rescue began. Not with an army, not with a noble uprising, but with a mother, 2 children, a stolen key ring, and a palace that had never imagined the smallest people in the room would be the ones to break its lies open. They moved through the passages in silence, up the old chapel stair, through the hidden trapdoor beneath the altar, into a side corridor where the air smelled like candle wax and dust. Octavia pointed at the old stone latch hidden beneath the cloth. "If I do not return in an hour," she told them, "you run. Understand?" Sarah folded her arms. "Why are not running?" That was not a suggestion. Marek looked at the passage darkly. "What can help?" "You have already helped." "That doesn't mean we're done." Octavia's throat tightened. She hated this part. The part where children became brave, because the adults around them had failed. "Stay here," she said, forcing the command into a voice that did not shake. "Wait. If I do not come back, go to the stables. Take horses. Ride to your aunt's estate and do not stop." Sarah's eyes flashed. "You say that like we would leave you." Octavia met her gaze. I say it because I need you alive." That shut her up, only for a moment. Then both children gave the kind of reluctant nod that meant they were obeying only for now. Octavia left them, hidden beneath the chapel, and went back into the palace. She had 3 priorities: find the king, expose Emmeline, survive long enough to do both. The guards in the corridor did not question her when she said Emmeline had committed treason. That alone told her how deep the rot ran. They followed. Good. One useful thing, at least. The castle moved like something waking. People were running. A bell had begun to ring somewhere in the upper hall. Then Octavia heard voices ahead. Not 1, 2. Lionel and Emmeline. She burst into the hall and froze. Emmeline was crying against the king's shoulder. Lionel had one arm around her. The sight hit Octavia like a blow. He looked up. His face went hard the moment he saw her. And that was when she knew. This was not Lionel. Not fully. Not anymore. Too stiff. Too formal. Too controlled. The posture was wrong. The focus was wrong. The expression was wrong. It was him and not him at once. A performance made of stolen gestures. Emmeline stepped back, wiping her face. Lionel spoke. His voice was cold. "Emmeline told me everything." Octavia went still. "She told me how you tried to attack her." Her jaw fell open. "What?" His gaze did not waver. "She said you accused her of things without cause." Octavia's shock turned instantly to rage. "Lionel, listen to me." He cut her off. The guards moved. Octavia took one look at the false calm on his face and did the only thing that made sense. She pointed at him and said, "You are not Lionel." The room went still. The guards paused. Lionel's expression did not change, but Emmeline's did. That was the crack, not his. Hers. Octavia saw it instantly. The woman beside him had slipped, just for a second, and in that second her eyes had said too much. Then her son burst in from the corridor. In wolf form. A blur of silver and white, he launched himself at the king and bit hard into the man's arm. The cry that came out was wrong. Too high, too sharp. Not Lionel's voice. The face rippled, and the room finally saw it. The man at the center of the hall changed. Not slowly, not subtly. His features shifted like water being struck. The guards shouted. People screamed. Octavia stared as the false king collapsed into a different shape entirely. A man she did not know. Not noble, not royal. Just a man with average features and desperate eyes. Emmeline's mouth opened in horror. "Ivor," she whispered. So that was his name. The brother. The other hand on the crown. The one hiding in plain sight. Merrick backed away from the man's arm, fur on his mouth. "We figured it out," he said breathlessly. Pain makes them switch back. Octavia did not waste a second. She turned to Emmeline. The sword she took from a stunned guard was at her throat before the woman could recover. "Where is he?" Emmeline's face had gone paper, white. "Ooh." Octavia pressed harder. "Lionel?" Ivor took a step back. The room pulsed with frozen fear. Then Emmeline broke, not into honesty, into panic. "You don't understand," she said, tears spilling too fast to be convincing. "I only wanted." Octavia's voice was terrifyingly calm. "Where is my husband?" The answer came, finally, from Ivor. Hidden one word. Enough to turn the blood in Octavia's veins to ice. "Where?" Ivor's jaw tightened. He did not answer. So Octavia pressed the blade closer. Emmeline began to cry for real now. Not because she was sorry. Because she had lost control, and control in a palace like this, was everything. One guard ran to fetch the antidote Emmeline had hidden in her chambers. Another led the way as Merrick followed Lionel's scent through the corridors below the palace. The children were faster than the adults. Of course they were, because children are never as foolish as the powerful think they are. They found the hidden door in the stone wall. They found the passage. They found the small chamber at the end. And there, sitting in a chair in the dark, staring at nothing, was the real Lionel. Alive, breathing, thin, unseeing. Octavia stopped breathing. For a moment, she could not move. Not because she was afraid, because she was looking at a ghost that had refused to die. Lionel lifted his head slightly at the sound of her breath. His eyes focused, and when they landed on her, the world broke open. He whispered her name like a man surfacing from deep water. Octavia. The sound of it nearly undid her. She stepped forward. Merrick and Syrah stood behind her, silent. Lionel looked at the children, then back at her. His face changed in tiny increments, as if he could not trust what he was seeing. "You came back," he said. It was barely a breath. Octavia laughed once through the tears gathering in her throat. "Of course I came back." He swallowed hard. "I thought you were gone?" "I was," she whispered. "But not where you thought." He smiled then, a broken, exhausted smile. And in that moment she knew for certain that whatever had happened between them 7 years ago, the real wound had been bigger than a betrayal. It had been a theft. He had been taken from her, and she from him, and neither of them had known by whom. But the reunion did not last, because the chamber door slammed open. Ivor stood there with 2 guards and a vial in his hand. He looked far more afraid than he wanted to admit. "Too late," he said. Lionel went rigid. Octavia's blood turned to ice. The veil, whatever had kept Lionel hidden, whatever had drugged him, whatever had made him disappear, Ivor held it between 2 fingers like a threat. "The wedding goes on," he said. "Whether he lives or not." Octavia stared at him. "No," she said. Ivor smiled. "You still think this is about morality?" "This is about my family," he snorted. "This is about succession." Lionel tried to rise from the chair and nearly fell. Octavia caught his arm. A small contact. A terrible one. The room seemed to flicker. Then Ivor said the thing that made every remaining illusion disappear. "Your children are the seal," he said. "Without them, the line can be challenged. With them, it can be locked in forever." Syrah went cold. Merrick's eyes flashed. Octavia's mouth tightened so hard it hurt. The children were not just witnesses. They were leverage. Proof, blood, claim. This was why Emmeline had panicked when they appeared. This was why the false king had stared at them like a threat. And this was why the conspiracy had worked so hard to bury the truth. Because once the children existed, the old court could not erase Lionel without erasing the line. And if they erased the line, they risked exposing everything. The whole machine was built on continuity. If continuity broke, the lie died. That meant she had one chance. One. She drew a breath and looked at Lionel. "Can you walk?" His mouth twitched, despite everything. "I can try." "That is not a yes. It is the best I have." She looked at the children, then at the guards, then at the vial in Ivor's hand, and she made a decision. "Then we do not let them finish the wedding." The hall of glass was waiting. The palace above them was already moving. And somewhere up there, Emmeline was preparing to crown a false history in front of the kingdom itself. Octavia had survived 7 years in exile. She had survived humiliation, grief, suspicion, and motherhood under pressure. Now she was going to walk back into the heart of the lie and drag the truth out by the throat. Because the false king had made one mistake. He had underestimated the one thing queens learn when the world decides to bury them. They become very good at digging back out. The hall of glass was full when they arrived. Of course it was. The court had assembled for the wedding, as if disaster were not already breathing down the walls. Nobles stood in polished ranks. Counselors occupied the front seats. Musicians waited with their instruments at the ready. The ceremonial oath table gleamed beneath the windows, and at the center of it all stood the false king, perfectly dressed, perfectly composed. Next to him, Emmeline wore pale gold and a serene expression that would have looked almost beautiful if it had not been standing on a grave. Then the doors opened, and the entire hall turned. Octavia entered first. Lionel followed. The children came behind them. The silence that fell was so complete it felt like a spell breaking. The false king went still. Emmeline's smile vanished. A ripple of murmurs ran through the room. Octavia did not stop walking until she reached the center of the floor. Then she turned and spoke, her voice carrying cleanly through the hall. "You have been ruled by a lie." No one moved. She raised the archive ledger. "This is the record of substitutions, corrections, disappearances, and sealed names. It was hidden beneath the palace. It names the people responsible." The room began to stir. One counselor stood, then another. Lionel stepped forward slowly, and for the first time, the false king looked afraid. He recovered fast, though. Too fast. "Seize them," he ordered. No one obeyed. Not immediately. Because people need a moment to deny what they see. And what they saw now was impossible to deny. The real king had walked into the wedding alive. The queen who had vanished had returned with proof. 2 children stood beside them with the unmistakable faces of their bloodline. The false king's jaw tightened. Emmeline took a step back. Lionel spoke. His voice was raw, but it carried. "Who are you?" The false king's mouth twisted. "A man the court found useful." Lionel's eyes darkened. "You stole my life." The man laughed once. "No." Then, with a cruel little tilt of the head, "You were going to lose it anyway." The room erupted into whispering. That was all it took. The cracks spread. Octavia saw it move through the hall like a fracture in glass. And then Emmeline lost patience. Enough. The word cut through the noise. Every gaze turned to her. Her face had gone pale now. Not because she was innocent. Because she had lost control of the version of the story she expected to keep. "You do not understand what would have happened without us," she snapped. The kingdom was fracturing. The borders were unstable. The council was incompetent. Lionel was being watched by the wrong people. We had to preserve the line. By replacing him, Octavia asked. Emmeline's eyes flashed. By saving what was left, Lionel stared at her. The expression on his face was not rage. It was worse. It was the look of a man realizing he had been treated as an object for so long that even his loyalty had been weaponized against him. "You did this to me," he said quietly. Emmeline's shoulders trembled. "I protected you. You drugged me." Her lips parted. "You hid me." She looked desperate now. "I kept you alive." Lionel's face hardened into something cold enough to frighten the room. "Not as myself?" That hit hard. Emmeline flinched as if struck. Then the false king did the one thing no one expected. He laughed, then said, almost lazily, "This is the trouble with making a system of replacements. Eventually, everyone starts believing the role matters more than the face." Octavia's hand tightened around the ledger. The hall held its breath. And then, at the back of the room, a voice called out, "Open the ledger, Corvin." The archive master, suit stained, pale, and alive. He stepped into the hall, holding copied pages. More witnesses followed: a seamstress, a clerk, 2 guards, a physician, people who had seen things. People who had been silenced and not yet broken. The palace had been counting on their silence. It had not counted on timing. The false king's face shifted. Emmeline's expression failed completely. Ivor moved toward the side exit. Too late. Merrick, in wolf form, cut him off with a snarl that sent him stumbling backward into a guard's grasp. Sarah snatched the false king's sleeve and bit hard enough to draw blood. He yelped. The noise tore through whatever spell of calm the hall had left. And there it was. The final proof. The false king changed. Not into Lionel, into the man beneath. The one the court had been hiding under layers of borrowed identity. The hall erupted. People shouted. Guards drew weapons. Nobles fled. The ceremony collapsed in a storm of silk and panic. Octavia moved without thinking. She drove the ledger into a council table, slapped the ring of seals down beside it, and shouted, "Look at the pages." Her voice cut through the chaos. Look at the names. One by one, people did. And one by one, the lie lost ground. Because paper is patient, and lies are not. When the room finally quieted enough to hear her, Octavia stepped forward, one hand on the oath table, and said the words that finished it. "He is my husband, the real one. The children are his. The ledger is proof. If you still need more, ask yourselves why the court has been burning archives and hiding bodies while pretending this was all a matter of etiquette." No one answered. That was the point. Because the hall already knew. Not every person in it, but enough. Enough for truth to survive. Emmeline went very still. Then her face cracked. Not into regret, into grief. That was somehow worse. "I only wanted to keep order," she whispered. Octavia looked at her with the kind of calm that comes after too much pain. "You built a prison and called it stability." Emmeline's mouth trembled. "I loved him." Lionel's answer came like ice. "You loved the idea of owning me." That ended her. Not dramatically, just enough. The room, once shaken, began to reorganize itself around the new reality. The false king was dragged away. Ivor was seized. The council split into factions within the hour. Guards moved. Orders were given. Witnesses were collected. The kingdom, at last, was forced to see its own face. And for the first time in 7 years, the man Octavia had once loved stood beside her in daylight and did not disappear. After the hall emptied, after the shouting receded into corridors and torchlight, after the first round of arrests and denials and legal panic had begun, Octavia found herself alone with Lionel and the children on a balcony overlooking the city. The rain had started. Soft, cold, steady. Lionel stood with one hand braced on the rail, still pale, still too thin, still very much alive. Octavia watched the rain fall over the streets below. Neither of them spoke at first. Then he said quietly, "I thought you left because you hated me." Octavia looked at him. The answer came easier than she expected. "I left because I thought you had become someone I could not survive loving." He absorbed that without flinching. Then he said, "I thought I had lost you." "You did. That hurt. It was supposed to." He nodded once. A long silence. Then the smallest child in the world did what only children can do. He broke the tension with the blunt truth adults keep stepping around. "Are we leaving again?" Merrick asked. Lionel looked at him, then at Sarah, then at Octavia. And for the first time, the question in his eyes was not about politics. It was about permission. Octavia felt that harder than anything else. Because this time, he was asking, not taking, not claiming, asking. She looked out over the city, the walls, the sky, then back at him. "No," she said. Lionel's shoulders loosened a fraction. Octavia kept going. "We are not leaving. Not yet." Sarah frowned. "That sounds like the start of another disaster." "It probably is." Merrick looked delighted by that answer. Lionel almost smiled. Not the rigid thing from the ballroom, not the practiced one from the study, a real one. Small, uneasy, tired, human. Octavia felt something in her chest shift. He glanced at her, as if noticing her expression. What now? She considered the rain, the city, the ruined court, the children, the man who had returned from being buried in his own kingdom. Then she said, "Now we find out who else was wearing who." Lionel's brow lifted. Octavia turned to face him fully. The archive ledgers named more than one replacement. You were not the only target. And if the old court could do this to a king, they could do it to anyone with enough value. He went still. That was enough to make the danger feel larger than the hall. Not just a stolen king, a stolen system, a stolen method, a whole hidden machinery built for identity theft at the highest level of power. The implications spread wider the more she thought about them. Nobles, counselors, ambassadors, perhaps even dead men who were not dead. Lionel seemed to realize the same thing at the same time. His face changed. "This is bigger than the throne," he said. Octavia nodded. Yes, the city below them did not know how much had changed. But it would, soon. The truth had broken through the surface. And once that happens, it never fully goes back. Not here. Not now. Not after 7 years of silence had finally been turned into a weapon. Octavia looked at the rain one last time and let herself breathe. Not because the pain was gone. It wasn't. Not because she trusted everything in front of her. She didn't. But because the lie had finally been named. And that meant it could die. So she stood on the balcony of the palace she had once fled, beside the husband she had thought she had lost, with her children at her side and a kingdom trembling below them, and she made a promise to herself that no one else could hear. No more hidden faces, no more stolen names, no more calling a prison peace just because it was decorated beautifully. This time, she would burn the lie down to the root. And this time, the kingdom would remember who brought the fire.